There is a plant that produces 500 pounds of food per year from a single planting. No replanting, no fertilizer, no pesticides, no complicated care. 500 pounds. That is enough to feed a family of 4 for an entire year, from one plant, planted once. If this sounds impossible, it should be the foundation of modern agriculture. It should be in every backyard, every farm, every food system on Earth. But it is not. This plant is not promoted. It is not encouraged. It does not appear in grocery stores. It does not appear in agricultural subsidies. It does not appear in nutrition guidelines. What appears instead is herbicide, spray schedules, eradication protocols, government classifications as a noxious weed. The problem is not quality. The problem is not yield. The problem is not taste or nutrition or adaptability. The problem is that this plant does not create dependence. It does not require annual seed purchases. It does not need fertilizer companies. It does not fit the profit model that drives modern agriculture. A plant that feeds you forever is a customer lost forever. This is the story of the most productive food plant you have never heard of. This is the story of how a $300 billion industry buried a 5,000-year-old solution. Welcome to Clean Eating Forgotten. The archive opens 5,000 years ago, in the river valleys of what is now the eastern United States. Picture a village along the banks of the Mississippi. The air is thick with morning mist. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Women move between raised garden beds, their hands working soil that has been cultivated for generations. They are not planting corn. They are not planting squash. They are tending something far more valuable. Something that will still be feeding this land 5,000 years later. Beneath the soil lies a network of tubers, knobby, irregular, golden brown like weathered wood, each one connected to others through an underground web of roots that spreads outward year after year. The women do not dig up all the tubers. They take only what they need for today, for this week. They leave the rest to multiply, to spread, to feed the village through winter and spring and summer and fall. This is not farming as we understand it. This is partnership. The plant gives, the people receive. Neither takes more than necessary. Neither demands more than can be sustained. The tubers taste like a blend of artichoke and sunflower seed, with a sweetness that deepens after the first frost of autumn. The texture is crisp when raw, like a water chestnut, creamy and rich when roasted over open flames. When you bite into one fresh from the ground, there is a clean, earthy flavor, nutty undertones, a slight sweetness that lingers on the tongue. The flesh is white and juicy, almost translucent at the edges where the sun has never touched. The smell of roasting tubers fills the village, caramelized, smoky, rich with the essence of the earth itself. Children gather around fires, waiting for their share of the harvest. This plant fed civilizations for millennia. Archaeological evidence from sites across North America confirms cultivation beginning around 3,000 years before the Common Era. That is 5,000 years of continuous human use. 5,000 years of reliable food, 5,000 years of zero replanting, 5,000 years of abundance without dependency. The Haudenosaunee people called it the Sunroot. They planted it once and harvested for generations. Their elders taught that this plant was a gift that kept giving, a teacher of patience and reciprocity. The Lakota used it as a staple food through brutal winters when nothing else grew. When snow buried the prairies and temperatures dropped below freezing for months, the tubers waited safely underground, ready whenever they were needed. The Cherokee cultivated entire fields that fed villages year after year. They developed sophisticated harvest techniques that maximized yield while ensuring regeneration. Take some, leave some. The formula for perpetual abundance. Different nations, different languages, different cultures, different ceremonies. The same understanding. This plant was not a backup food. It was not a supplement. It was not emergency rations. It was infrastructure. Living infrastructure that required no maintenance, no annual investment, no external inputs, no permission from anyone. Travel north to the Great Lakes region. The Ojibwe people cultivated sunroots in forest clearings, where sunlight penetrated the canopy. They noticed something remarkable. The plants thrived in poor soil where other crops failed. They grew tall in partial shade. They survived floods and droughts and early frosts. This was resilience encoded in biology. A plant that adapted to conditions instead of demanding perfect circumstances. A plant that worked with nature instead of requiring nature to be controlled. Travel east across the Atlantic Ocean. 1742. French explorers bring tubers back to Europe. They had seen what this plant could do. They wanted to share it with a continent struggling to feed itself. Within decades, the plant spreads across Europe. In the German countryside, farmers discover it thrives in poor soil where potatoes fail. Sandy soil, clay soil, soil that other crops rejected. In the Italian hills, villagers roast the tubers with olive oil and rosemary. They call it girasole, the sunflower root. The flavor becomes a regional delicacy, served in trattorias where families gather for Sunday meals. In English gardens, it becomes a reliable winter vegetable. Gardeners appreciate a crop that does not require spring planting, does not require summer weeding, does not require fall racing against frost. The tubers simply wait underground until someone needs them. The French call it topinamber. The Germans call it Erdbeeren, the earth pear. The English eventually call it Jerusalem artichoke, though it has nothing to do with Jerusalem and is not an artichoke. The more accurate name is Sunchoke, or sunroot. The scientific name is Helianthus tuberosus, a cousin of the sunflower with the same towering height and bright yellow flowers that track the sun across the sky. But here is what matters most. Every culture that encountered this plant recognized the same truth that indigenous Americans had known for millennia. Plant once, harvest forever. No seed purchases, no annual planting, no dependency on external systems. This was food freedom encoded in a root. Modern science would later confirm what these cultures knew through 5,000 years of practice. In 2018, researchers at Purdue University published findings in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. They analyzed the nutritional composition of sunchoke tubers across multiple growing conditions and soil types. The results challenged fundamental assumptions about root vegetables. The tubers contained 17% carbohydrates by weight. That is comparable to potatoes. Enough to provide substantial energy. Enough to serve as a dietary staple. But the carbohydrate structure was completely different. Potatoes store energy primarily as starch. Starch converts rapidly to glucose in the body. Within 30 minutes of eating potatoes, blood sugar spikes. Insulin floods the system. Energy peaks briefly, then crashes within hours. The cycle of hunger begins again. Sunchokes store energy as inulin. Inulin is a prebiotic fiber that the human digestive system cannot break down directly. It passes through the stomach and small intestine without being absorbed. It reaches the colon intact, where beneficial bacteria ferment it into short-chain fatty acids. No blood sugar spike, no insulin surge, no energy crash. Sustained nutrition over hours instead of minutes. This is the difference between food that feeds you and food that spikes you. But the science goes deeper. In 2020, the European Journal of Nutrition published a meta-analysis of 14 clinical trials involving inulin consumption. The researchers examined data from over 800 participants across multiple countries. The findings were significant. Regular inulin intake was associated with a 12% improvement in insulin sensitivity. That means the body becomes better at regulating blood sugar naturally. Inflammation markers decreased by an average of 18%. Chronic inflammation is linked to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and autoimmune conditions. Calcium absorption improved by 20%. This matters especially for bone health in aging populations. Beneficial gut bacteria populations increased substantially. The microbiome, that community of trillions of organisms in your digestive system, responded positively to inulin as a food source. These are not marginal benefits. These are foundational changes in metabolic function. From a single dietary component that exists naturally in a plant you can grow for free. But here is where the research becomes uncomfortable for the agricultural industry. In 2019, Agricultural researchers at the University of Saskatchewan conducted multi-year field trials comparing sunchoke yields to potato yields under identical growing conditions. Potatoes produced an average of 15,000 pounds per acre in the first year. Respectable. Standard for commercial agriculture. Comparable to yields achieved on large-scale farms. Sunchokes produced an average of 22,000 pounds per acre in the first year. That is 47% higher yield with equivalent inputs. In the second year, the difference became dramatic. Potatoes required complete replanting, new seed stock purchased, soil preparation with tractor passes burning fuel, fertilizer application to replace nutrients depleted by the previous crop. The full cycle of inputs and labor and expense. Sunchokes required nothing. The researchers simply harvested tubers in fall and left the remaining root system in the ground. The plants regenerated automatically over winter. No purchases, no preparation, no intervention. Second-year yield from sunchokes, 28,000 pounds per acre. That is 87% higher than potatoes with zero input costs. By the third year, the sunchoke plots were producing over 30,000 pounds per acre. The potato plots remained at 15,000, requiring the same annual investment of seed, fertilizer, fuel, and labor every single year. The economics were overwhelming. Higher yields, lower costs, no annual purchases, no dependency on supply chains. The numbers seemed impossible. A perennial root vegetable that outproduced annuals while requiring no replanting, no fertilizer in most conditions, no pesticide in most regions, no irrigation beyond natural rainfall in many climates. So if this plant existed for 5,000 years, if indigenous peoples built food systems around it, if European farmers adopted it eagerly, if modern science confirms its superiority in multiple dimensions, why is it not in every grocery store? Why is it not the foundation of food security programs? Why does almost no one know about it? The answer has nothing to do with biology, nothing to do with nutrition, nothing to do with practical limitations. The answer is economic. The modern agricultural system is not designed to feed people efficiently. It is not optimized for nutrition or resilience or sustainability. It is designed to generate predictable revenue streams. It is designed to create dependency. It is designed to ensure that farmers must purchase inputs every single year without exception. Consider the seed industry. In 2023, the global commercial seed market was valued at $63 billion. That is $63 billion spent annually on seeds that farmers must purchase again and again and again. Corn seeds, soybean seeds, wheat seeds, potato seed stock, annual crops that require annual purchases. Dependency built into the biology. Now consider what happens when a farmer plants sunchokes. Year 1. Purchase tubers, plant them, water initially. Year 2. Harvest some tubers, leave the rest in ground. No purchase required. Year 3. Same thing. Harvest some, leave some. No purchase. Year 4. Year 5. Year 10. Year 20. Year 50. The same planting from year 1 continues producing without any additional seed purchases. From the perspective of the seed industry, this is a catastrophic business model. Every sunchoke planted is a customer lost. Not for one season, not for 1 year, forever. You cannot build a $63 billion industry on plants that eliminate the need for your products. But the economics get worse for those who profit from dependency. Consider the fertilizer industry. In 2022, the global fertilizer market was valued at $195 billion. Nearly $200 billion spent annually on nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that annual crops deplete from soil and farmers must replenish through purchased products. Sunchokes form symbiotic relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in soil. They actually improve soil fertility over time instead of depleting it. Studies show that soil after years of sunchoke cultivation contains higher organic matter and better structure than when the plants were first established. A farmer growing sunchokes does not need to purchase fertilizer. The plant feeds itself. The plant feeds the soil. The cycle sustains itself. From the perspective of the fertilizer industry, this is another catastrophic business model. Every acre planted with sunchokes is an acre that does not require their products. Not just this year, every year into the future. You cannot build a $195 billion industry on plants that make your products unnecessary. But wait, the economics continue. Consider the herbicide and pesticide industry. In 2023, the global crop protection chemicals market was valued at $68 billion. $68 billion spent annually on substances designed to kill weeds and insects that threaten annual monocultures. Sunchokes are aggressive spreaders. They grow tall, sometimes 10 feet or more. Their dense foliage shades out competing plants naturally. They outcompete most weeds without chemical intervention. Sunchokes have few natural pests in most growing regions outside their native range. The tubers remain underground, protected from most insects that devastate above-ground crops. Diseases that destroy annual plantings rarely affect established sunchoke patches. A farmer growing sunchokes needs minimal to no herbicide, minimal to no pesticide, minimal to no fungicide. The plant protects itself through biology rather than chemistry. From the perspective of the chemical industry, this is yet another catastrophic business model. Every sunchoke field is a field that does not require their products. Forever. Add up the numbers. 63 billion in seeds, 195 billion in fertilizer, 68 billion in crop protection chemicals. That is $326 billion annually in industries that have no business model if farmers grow perennial, self-fertilizing, pest-resistant crops. 326 billion reasons to make sure you never hear about sunchokes. This is not conspiracy. This is not malice. This is not evil people making evil plans. This is economics. This is the predictable behavior of industries protecting their revenue streams. This is what happens when profit determines what information spreads. When the economic incentive is to promote dependency, plants that create independence become invisible. But the suppression goes deeper than passive neglect. In the United States, sunchokes are officially classified as a noxious weed in several states. This means farmers can be fined for allowing them to spread. Landowners can be required to eradicate them at their own expense. Agricultural inspectors can order their removal. Think about that for a moment. A plant that produces 500 pounds of food per year. A plant cultivated for 5,000 years by indigenous peoples. A plant that fed entire civilizations. A plant that modern science confirms is nutritionally superior to most commercial crops. Classified as a weed. Subject to mandatory eradication. Treated as a threat to agricultural productivity. The official justification is that sunchokes spread aggressively and are difficult to remove once established. This is accurate. The tubers regenerate from even small fragments left in the soil. A single piece the size of a thumbnail can grow into a new plant. But this characteristic was considered a feature for 5,000 years. This is what made the plant valuable. Plant once, harvest forever. The spreading was the entire point. The persistence was the gift. Only when the goal shifted from feeding people to generating revenue did spreading become a problem. Only when control became more important than abundance did persistence become a threat. A plant that spreads freely gives farmers independence. A plant that must be purchased every year creates dependence. Modern agriculture chose dependence, then called independence a weed. Meanwhile, the nutritional compound that makes sunchokes valuable has been extracted and turned into a separate product. In 2022, the global inulin market was valued at $2.3 billion, projected to reach $3.8 billion by 2030. The same compound that exists naturally in a plant you can grow for free is now sold as a processed supplement, extracted, refined, packaged, marketed, priced for profit. The plant that produces inulin is treated as a weed requiring eradication. The extracted compound is sold as a premium health product. The connection between them is never mentioned in marketing materials. This is how value is captured, while the source of value is erased from public awareness. But the knowledge was never completely lost. In small farms across the American Midwest, families continue growing sunchokes the way their grandparents did. Planting once, harvesting each fall after frost, leaving tubers in the ground to regenerate for next year, and the year after, and the decade after. In permaculture communities around the world, sunchokes are recognized as a foundational perennial. Food forests include them as a reliable calorie source that requires almost no management after establishment. In traditional communities that never abandoned old ways, the Sunroot